Welcome to Advanced Passion, the podcast where I invite a guest to come on and evangelize me about something they are passionate about. It could be a book, it could be a movie, it could be some food, a place, a person, pretty much anything at all. Don't forget, of course, to comment, like, subscribe. Make sure you never miss out on any of these great conversations that we're having every single week. Do check it out. Now, today I'm delighted to be joined by a great friend. Had many exciting adventures and experiences with this guy over the years. Please give a very warm podcast welcome. I mean, they won't be able, you won't be able to hear you, but just do it at home anyway. For Mr. Chip Kendall.
Hey!
I wish there was a way that you could hear, viewers or listeners just saying welcome. But I guess you just have to put up with like comments or something instead. And hope that none of them are too disparaging or offensive towards you.
Yeah, and thinking about where most people kind of watch these things, maybe in the toilets or whatever, I think I'm quite glad that the audio is switched off.
It's not a two-way street, yeah. Absolutely. So, Chip, so good to have you on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Chip. I have a wife who is British, but I am not. I have 3 kids with British accents, and I can't even try to do a British accent, as Ben will tell you. They're actually getting better at doing their American accents, but that's kind of cool. I live in Stockport, Greater Manchester, and I have been here for 20 years as a missionary to this godforsaken land. And I am so thankful that I'm going on holiday soon, back to the land of the free and the home of the brave. The land of the free and the home of the brave. Play ball.
See, this is why people don't like Americans, Chip. You're just demonstrating it to us right now. I'm just. No,
here's
we're all joking. You love the UK, don't you?
My philosophy is that British people do become Americans once they've had a pint.
Well, loud.
Exactly.
Loud. Yeah. So you've been here for more than 20 years and involved in all sorts of amazing ministry. You've been an evangelist, preaching the gospel, using music largely to do that. If people want to check out your music and stuff on Spotify, how can they do that?
Yeah, just search Chip Kendall, Kendall. It's
as simple as that. As soon as I said it, I thought to myself, it's as simple as putting your name into the search bar, isn't it? It's not complicated. But do go check out Chip's music, and is there like a web presence, because you're really involved in this youth choir stuff, this soul children choir stuff. I mean, we're going to get into your passion, which I'm excited to talk about today, because you're the first person I've had on who's talking about one of my great passions, which is movies. But before we get to that passion, another one of your passions is that you love doing these soul children choirs. What's that all about?
Yeah, so I toured Norway a number of years ago, and it was incredible. Just a really fun tour. I love Norway. It's like the land of adventure. But, at some point along the way, I got introduced to this movement of youth gospel choirs. So all these like Norwegians, like 1,000 Norwegian kids on stage singing and dancing to like American Black gospel music. And it blew my mind. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen ever. And then they asked me to come to the Soul Children International Festival. And by then they had more than doubled. So you got 2,500 Norwegian kids. Then they wanted to learn my song, and they wanted to do it as a parade through Oslo city center. And I was done. I was like, it doesn't get any better than this. I was like, sign me up. Where's Soul Children in the UK? They said, actually, we haven't got anybody who's spearheading that yet. And I was like, pick me. I would love to help do that. So we've done it. We're launching a national charity, Soul Children UK. We've got an incredible group of trustees. I mean, these guys, I wish I had time to go into all of it, but we're going to be launching. We're using Festival Manchester as a little bit of a launch pad for some stuff as well. Honestly, Ben, it's the most exciting, thrilling roller coaster ride of faith that I've ever been on in my whole life. And I know we're just getting started. It's great.
That's great. You sound almost as excited about that as you do about going to America.
Almost. Oh, going to America. I thought
almost, not quite, but almost. So let's jump into your passion today. I'm ready to be evangelized. I don't think it's going to be a hard job for you to evangelize me on what we're looking at today from my understanding of it. So it's not America. I do actually love America. Amazing. Always have good times when I head over there, but we're not talking about America today. but we are talking about something that did come out of Hollywood land. So Chip, evangelize me. What is your passion?
My passionate subject today, if you asked me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and right now, what my favorite movie of all time is, it is The Princess Bride.
Hey, look at that. That doesn't look like a movie though, Chip. That looks like a book.
Nope, this is what
Are you
movies
confused?
look like these days. You need to get yourself hooked up, Ben, Jack. You're still living in 2020. No, yeah, it started off as a film. Actually, parts of it filmed right around here where we are, Castleton.
Wow.
And then that was back in the 70s. Then the guy who was the screenwriter decided to turn it into a book and add a whole sequel to the storyline of The Princess Bride and put it in a book. So there's 2 movies worth of stuff in this book. It's awesome.
Oh, wow. So come on then, hit me. Why The Princess Bride? Why is this the movie that you love? What is it about it? Imagine, I mean, I've seen it many times, but imagine I've never seen it. Imagine you're speaking to our listeners now. Evangelize us. Why is The Princess Bride the movie for you?
Yeah, I think it's just got everything in it. It's at its core, it's a love story, but it has got so much witty humor in it. As a kid, I grew up watching wrestling, and this movie has Andre the Giant in it.
Yes, it does. Now, for anyone who's listening or watching who doesn't know who Andre the Giant is, how would you explain who Andre the Giant was? Sadly, he's not with us anymore. Sadly,
I know he's not. He just was one of these guys. He's from like Turkey or somewhere, wasn't he? Or from I can't remember where.
Eastern Europe somewhere, I believe. Yeah.
French speaking, I think. But anyway, he was just a huge giant of a man who would wrestle.
Literally a giant.
He was actually a giant, yeah. And he'd jump in the ring with Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage and all the guys that I grew up watching on WWF back then.
Yeah, he had massive hands, didn't he? He had hands the hands of the size of my body. He could just pick me up with one hand. Humongous. I remember I watched wrestling as well as a kid, and I remember that. But also in The Princess Bride, his hands compared to people's faces and stuff, it's so big.
See, here,
he's kind of the epitome of the gentle giant, though, wasn't he? Really.
Well, I was gonna say over here you guys have the BFG, the big friendly giant.
Yeah.
And I didn't grow up with the BFG. I grew up with Andre the Giant. but it's got him in it. It's also got a whole kind of undercurrent story about revenge and kind of whether that's a worthwhile thing and miracles, and I mean it's got all kinds of stuff in it. And the guy who wrote it, William Goldman, is a Jewish guy. I grew up in Israel, so that was really cool for me. But I remember one time, this is how passionate I was about this film. My friend Toby and I stayed up late one night. There's a really famous sword fighting scene. We stayed up late one night trying to count the number of times the swords hit each other in this sword fighting scene. And I mean, we got to like 220 or something before we finally gave up and had to go to bed. I mean, we were just like, it was like back in the day VCRs, and we're like trying to slow it down and like watch it and count the number of clangs. Anyway, I've seen this movie so many times.
To be fair, it was in the very early days. There weren't many Nintendos floating around back then, were they? So this was what you did. You didn't kind of try and get to the next level of Mario. You just counted how many sword strokes there were in a movie that you like. We've all been there, I'm sure. But what is it? What is it about? No, because I totally get it. What is it about when there's particularly when you're a kid?
Yeah.
And there's a movie that you love and you just can't get enough of every part of it, isn't it? It's not just that you want to watch the movie again. You want to consume it. You want to watch every scene, and you're right. You start getting obsessive over counting and spotting things in the background. And what is it about movies that do that to us?
I know, and the thing in particular about Princess Bride is it starts like the context that they put it in is that this grandfather comes to his grandson's house in order to read him something because the kid's ill. He's like off school. And the grandfather kind of comes, and the kid doesn't even want to hear the story at first. No. He's gonna rip him away from his game that he's playing, and then by the end, the kid is like so engrossed in the story. So I think they were really clever at how they did that, because what they were modeling in the film is actually what happens to every kid watching the film. And it's just
that's
funny,
so true.
and it's just great. And there's a really immortal line in it where his name is Indigo Montoya. My name is Indigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. And that's like his line. That's like his character arc. It starts on that line just over and over and over. That's the truth that he's fed himself. And I think actually that's what it is. That's what drew me into this movie, was the characters. It's got really good, strong, clear characters in it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that we could unpack from this movie. It's good. I hope over the time that actually we'll get a bunch of guests that will come on here and bring different types of movies. But this is the first movie that we've talked about on the podcast, and I'm really pleased that you picked this one. Partly because it's a movie that I really like too, and know very well. But I think partly because it's so rich. There's so much going on. So maybe we could work through it a little bit, because let's start with the kind of book ending that it has, which is, like you say, for those people who haven't seen it, it's a young boy who's sick in bed, not feeling very well, and his grandfather comes basically to look after him and read him a story, but he's not, like you say, he's not interested at all, is he, in the story? And it's only through persevering with the story that the grandfather keeps persevering. And there's multiple points during the film where the boy interjects, and we cut away from the fairy tale story that we're watching. We cut back to his bedroom, and the grandfather getting, a little bit more flustered that the boy keeps interjecting. But you see a transformation in the boy all the way through. What is it about that kind of story sharing that can actually initially be like, I'm not interested in that, but as we persevere, people grow into the story?
Yeah, there's a really great book called Story Brand. In fact, I think they've turned it into a whole movement now. And what they talk about loads in that is the power of curiosity. If you can pique someone's interest or their curiosity early on, then they are putty in your hands, because really a good storyteller is someone who's able to put a little bit of bait out there, and pick up on. And I think that's really what drew me to Princess Bride, was, what is the bait? I mean, there's like so much bait. There's so much to be interested in and to be intrigued by. And some people will really like certain elements of it. Some people won't. And it's just got this, I don't know. The guys are geniuses who wrote it. I'd love to meet him. Well, he's gone. He's in heaven as well now, William Goldman. But, at the end of the day, that whole ability to put bait out there, and then as they kind of bite the bait, to kind of get a little bit more interested. And then, do you remember at one point in this story, Fred Savage, the boy, says,
yes,
he says, "Oh, let's skip that part. Let's move on to the sword fight, right?" Yeah. And so the grandfather, you see his response to that is, "Okay, all right." Like, he's kind of is methodical and thoughtful about it, and we'll skip to that part. And then, I don't want to give away too much, but at the end, he's just fully sold on every single part of the story. He wants to know it.
Yeah, and it is interesting, isn't it? Because again, if we were to relate any of this stuff to evangelism and us helping people to start thinking about life, big picture stuff, the human experience, the identity of God, and then in the midst of all of that, the actual gospel itself. It is interesting where people might want to jump into that story, because again, as someone who wants to share the gospel, I might have a preference with where I want to begin. Generally speaking, I actually would like to begin at the beginning, which I've been told is a very good place to start, and go right back to the beginning. And I think particularly in this day and age, in our Western culture, where identity is such a topic of conversation and contention, and in many ways an idol. Not that identity is unimportant, it's very important, but identity and personal identity has become such an idol in the age. To actually be able to go back to the beginning and say, well, where do we even come from if we're going to consider who we actually are, is important. And yet there are many people in our world who may be a little bit like the little boy. I don't want that part of the story. Skip to the good bit. Skip to the bit that I'm actually interested. Oh, not the kissing part where they kiss. Oh, gross. There's a few points where he's like, no, Grandpa, don't read me the kissing parts. I don't want to know. Well, I think that's very illuminating, actually, for how we're presenting our faith to the world. How do we actually work with people when they're like, I'm not interested in that bit, can we skip to that bit? Do we do that, or do we persevere and try and actually still give them the bit that we think that they should have? What do you think about that?
No, that's a really good point, Ben. You're a total genius. I've told this many times, but you're absolutely right, because that's the way people are wired. People are wired to go, well, I don't connect with that part of the story right now. Like if they're honest with you, and there's a thing about the Bible. They say you don't read the Bible reads you. And I only through time and having read the Bible and searched it out for stuff, do I really come across what that means. We all come to an experience of engaging with a book or engaging with an app or however we connect with the Bible. Ultimately, we know that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus is a living Bible. He's the living Word. And people who interacted with him, they suddenly had these encounters that can only be because Jesus was God made flesh. He was the Word of God made flesh. And I was talking to a Bible translator back in the day. So we were doing these gigs in Princess Risborough. It was very posh. Apologies if you're watching this from Princess Risborough. But I was trying to get these kids in high school to talk to me. And I said, what kind of movies are you into? And he goes, I don't watch telly. And I said, really? He goes, I have 4 horses. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, great. And so he, when we were there, I got to hang out with a Bible translator. And I said to him, what's the best translation of the Bible available to read? And he said, the best translation of the Bible has always been and always will be a person. The Word became flesh. And then he said to me, he goes, you will be the only translation of the Bible that some of the young people you encounter in your life will ever read. Yeah. You're it. And in that moment, I was like, ooh, I was like, oh man, I gotta make sure my life. No pressure. But he's 100% right. I mean, Scripture Union have done all these studies, right? And they know that 95% of young people in this nation are unchurched. Only 5% of them go to church. So if there's 95% of people that don't encounter church, and we as Christians, for whatever reason, we're in their school or we're in their workplace or whatever, we encounter them, we might be it. We might be the only part of the story. So for them to skip to the good part is skip to what difference it's made in your life. That's what it means. That's what they mean by that. And so I think you're absolutely right, Ben. We've got to be sensitive to the fact that the areas that we think people will be interested in the gospel might not be what they're actually interested in. They might be dealing with unforgiveness. They might be dealing with bitterness. They might be dealing with loss and sadness and depression. They might be dealing with hedonism and just living for pleasure. And there could be so many different levels that people could be at. And for us to kind of come along and go, let me read you John 3:16. It's like, well, great. Whoop-de-doo. How does that apply to my own life? Yeah. It's a really good point that you're making.
Yeah, and even bits that are kind of really distasteful and unpalatable. Again, the kid in the movie, he has a really like full-on response to the kissing scenes. If his grandfather's like reading any part where they kiss, then it cuts back to the room and he's like, "No, Grandpa, stop!" And it's distasteful to him. He doesn't want anything to do with it. And again, I think we have to be aware that there are various elements of Christianity, Christian doctrine, and what the Bible teaches that, for one reason or another, are distasteful to the world. And it doesn't mean that we then cut those pages out of the Bible and turn it into a completely different story. But it does mean, I think, that we're thoughtful about what we're actually presenting and our route into the story and where it is that we pick it up. We're going to be clear about the truth that we hold. We're not going to make it more palatable. We're not going to water it down. But our starting position in some of these things might want to be thought through. Equally, of course, I think it can work the other way, can't it? I think sometimes the Spirit of God can lead you to just double down on some of this stuff. And even though it's distasteful and unpalatable for the world, the Spirit of God just gives you that confidence and boldness and clarity to double down and be like, well, fair enough that you find it that way, but I need to tell you that this is what it is. In love and humility, this is what it is, and not shy away. And so, we want to have good, we want to be creative, don't we? We want to be thoughtful, we want to be wise. But in all of this, we want to defer to the wisdom of heaven and the Spirit of God himself.
Yeah, I think the phrase that I've heard that's really helped me is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to a lot of times with conversations. And that's why it's super important. I'm going to harp on about this forever and ever until people actually read it. But I mean, people have read it, but Ben Jack's book.
I like the way you said that. Until we get at least one person reading this book, I'm going to keep talking about it.
I know where you sleep at night. I will come and make sure you read Ben Jack's book.
Like a weird tooth fairy will just leave one under your pillow to read in the morning.
No, Ben Jack's book. No, man, I honestly didn't mean to be disingenuous there. But your book, if Jesus is the answer, then what's the question? That is just, it's such a great on-ramp for people who want to be more evangelistic, or they want to be more of a witness or a better witness to Christ. You've got to start with the right questions. What are the questions that we're asking? Ben, you know this from when we used to go into schools and do question and answer sessions. We would do this whole long 45-minute lesson, and it would be full of music and games and science experiments. And then we'd come down to the question and answer session. And one of the worst things would be when nobody had a question. And you're like, oh, is it because you just got the peer pressure in the room? Is it because you really don't care? You must have questions. And then Ben Jack, without fail, would turn it around and he would go, well, let me ask you a question. And I was like, yes, my hero. Because honestly,
you're bigging me up far too much in this podcast. It's going to sound very narcissistic by the end of it.
Let's interview that guy again.
Yeah, but just to let you know, I am going to get you on again because this is great. This is great. But no, you're right. Those times at the end of lessons where again, multiple reasons, I'm sure, why people felt a bit cagey about asking questions at times. But generally speaking, I think we've both found it to be true, haven't we? That actually just offering a question that opens up a conversation is always the most fruitful way to create a dialogue, to develop a relationship and a friendship that can go beyond that moment as well.
Yeah, and a question does lots of things at once.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it says, I'm beneath you, right? I'm asking you a question because you have something to teach me, or you have something to say to me, or you have something. On another hand, I'm asking you a question because I care about you. I care about you more than you care. I care about you more than I care about how much you care about me. Do you get that?
I do get that. That's good. That's really good.
And a question is like one of the most humble things you could do. And it starts from a place of, I'm here, I really want to help you, as opposed to, I'm going to teach you what you need to know. It's honestly, your book is just awesome.
Don't you think that one of the most undervalued questions, because we've turned it into not a question, we've turned it into just a greeting, is the simple question, how are you? I just think that question is three of the most profound words that you can put together in the English language and use. And we've turned it into just a way of saying hello. Like, how are you? And we're not really, when we say that, expecting somebody to genuinely then necessarily open up and express. We're kind of expecting something to come back doing, yeah, not bad, or pretty good, really good, doing all right, And I'm like, let's reclaim the how are you question as not a greeting, but as an opportunity in every single conversation to genuinely show people I care about you. And I'm not saying hello, I'm saying, how are you? And I would like to know. And let's see what happens from there.
Do you know what's interesting? In the Bible, Jesus's way to respond to questions was the rabbinical way. He was a good rabbi.
Yeah.
He would respond to a question with a question. And I think if we can get the art of asking questions again, then we'll be onto something there for sure.
Coming back to the movie a little bit, because there is one thing about The Princess Bride that does slightly bug me, and it is the revenge. Like, I love it, but it's the revenge theme that runs through The Princess Bride. And I'm going to spoil the ending, so if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry. Either skip forward to a different part of the podcast, or just get with the program of watching a movie that's 30 years old and you've had plenty of time to watch it. But Inigo Montoya, he all the way wants to get revenge for his father's death, and like you say, he's preparing himself. Interestingly, in some of these revenge movies that are more kind of positive and want to give a positive message, they tend to show that actually the revenge in and of itself is not a good thing, that it doesn't bring peace, it doesn't lead you where you think it's going to lead you. And there's the old proverb about, if you're going to go looking for revenge, you better dig two graves, one for the person you get and one for yourself who'll die along the way as you go down that road. But I think in The Princess Bride, considering it's this kind of fairy tale adventure and it's very positive and nice, the truth is he does actually get revenge on the bad guy, and it's viewed very positively. It's viewed as this is a good thing. Yeah. And we're kind of cheering, aren't we? We're like, yeah, you got him. You got revenge and you don't. And I always found that kind of a little bit problematic, because whilst we want the good guys to win, there is this little weird implication that actually revenge is a good thing, which obviously is quite counter to the gospel itself, that God is not taking revenge on us. Yeah. God is actually made the way by which his peace can come upon us, and we can know completely undeservingly, we can know restoration and redemption instead of revenge. So what's your approach, Chip? If you're engaging with pop culture and stuff like that, maybe you're showing a movie to friends and you want to have a conversation afterwards and draw out some good, interesting Christian conversation from it, how would you deal with things that are in the movie that are counter to the gospel? How would you use those elements?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not a Christian film. I don't think it's made trying to tell a Bible story or anything like that. There's a verse in Romans 12 that says, do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. It is mine to avenge. Obviously, Avengers are really popular right now, but God says it is mine to avenge. And he says, the way to I will repay. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, right? Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So that to me is like a two-way wisdom street there. He's like, ultimately, what you want is revenge. You want that person to learn from their mistakes and to actually pay for what they've done. But God's saying, that's not bad. I'm going to make sure that they get what's coming to them. He's like, leave that to me. Just make sure that if you're going to do it, it's through showing kindness. It's through showing love. So I think if there are elements like that where we get a brilliant picture of a definition of revenge, what I would do is I would dig into that a little bit and go, have you felt that way before? Yes, I felt that way. Great. Now we're able to articulate, we're able to express what the Bible calls revenge. Now here's the Bible's take on it. Do you know what I mean? So you kind of play good cop, bad cop a little bit. That's what I would do anyway.
Well, I think that's great, because it actually comes back to a little bit of what you're talking about with story and stuff, and drawing people. You're drawing people in, and you're saying this quest that he goes on, and with that famous little line that he has, you call my father prepared to die, all that great stuff. And the fact that we are cheering when he kind of gets his revenge. What does that tell us about us? It tells us that we want justice. Yeah. And we've seen an injustice and we want justice. However, if we try to outwork justice, it will actually lead ultimately probably to more chaos and more injustice, which is why we've got to leave the ultimate justice in the hands of the one who is truly just. So what does that leave us in doing in terms of our responsibility? It leaves us doing the unthinkable, loving our enemy. So these core concepts that are so central to the Christian faith, I think can come out in a profound way. But you've illuminated my mind there, because I'm straight away thinking, yes, bring the person into the story. Have you felt that way? Have you? And again, it's about making it relatable and authentic to the experience that they've actually got.
Yeah, I think movies and books are really great vehicles for education, for helping people to articulate or express something. I think really what draws me most to Jim Carrey as a comedian is that he will enact something that I have felt so many times, and it just hits you on another level to go, yeah, I've been there. Like every time I want to throw up, he just like a funny thing. And you're like, yeah, that he's almost making a cartoon out of what I've felt, you know. And my wife and I actually met at arts college. We met at this mime school in California, and we learn about something called coloration and decoloration. And we learn about when you do something on stage, you have to do it 10 times bigger in order for somebody at the very, very back to be able to see what's going on and be able to understand what's being communicated to them. And there's a word for it. I can't remember what it is right now. It might just be the coloration of it, but it's got to be much bigger. And I think that's often what books and stories and popular culture songs are the same as well, is they're taking like a thought and they're making it like so extreme, you know, that you at least get the little seed that's in there, and then you can have some fun with all the extra packaging. So if we're able to do that as storytellers, as good storytellers, good news bringers, then I think that that's what it is, to pinpoint what is the little seed that's in there, and then take that seed and go, right, now check out this seed over here.
In terms of like using something like The Princess Bride's evangelism, this is something that you're really passionate about. You love the movie, you've seen it so many times.
Yeah.
Obviously there's the kind of very on the nose example of, well, put a movie night on and invite people around, or just have friends around for fun and fellowship, and natural conversation will flow off. What did you think of that movie? Hey, it was interesting when he did that, and what do you think about that? And where it's kind of just out of normative relationship, or a more formalized movie night where you know that there's going to be some kind of discussion afterwards. Yeah, of course, you can use any medium, a book club, or go to an art gallery together, whatever your kind of poison is in that respect. But are there more kind of slightly more creative ways in which we can use some of this stuff to help people think through? And I guess what I'm particularly drawn to is what you were talking about, of using these things to actually draw people in, not to just comment from the outside as a passive observer, but to draw people in to the story that you're experiencing through a book, a movie, a video game, a song. Like, how would you encourage our listeners to get creative with drawing people into those stories for gospel purpose?
Well, I think everybody's different, right? We're all unique, and we all have certain aspects of stories that draw our attention, or that pique our interest. And if you're going by the kind of story brand model, it would be to find out what are the things that make you interested, and then utilize that. So go, well, if I find this interesting, then the people that I like to hang around are probably going to find this interesting as well. And my friends, and sometimes the fodder is there in front of us as somebody will come, a friend or whatever, and say, you know, oh, I just went to see this film, right? Or I've been reading this book, or I've come across this story on social media. And it's easy to go, oh yeah, like I watched that too. And you know, and just go along with whatever anybody who watches that movie does. But it would take just an extra little ounce of attention to detail to go, you know, have you noticed how that movie or that story really talks about X? And it might not be the most obvious point, but it's something that stood out to you. And if it stood out to you, it could stand out to them. That is a really great on-ramp, a really great platform. So to answer your question, Ben, it's almost not having to be creative and come up with your own Lion, Witch, in the Wardrobe, but actually go, what are they already into? And finding those bridges, those on-ramps for the gospel based on what they're already into, and just get their take on it, you know? Because at the end of the day, they might not see it the way you do, but if they do, that's a really good opportunity to do that. You know, I know we're running out of time, but we often talk about advance as being like the evangelists, or like the striker in the football team. And that's one way of looking at it. But another way that I've been thinking about recently is that at the end of the day, evangelists are electricians, right? You're kind of normal, everyday, white collar electrician. They get invited to go out to a house. They go into the house and they rewire. They do whatever they need to do to get the lights to switch on. And that doesn't mean that they are personally providing the electricity. They're just helping this person to turn on the lights in their house. And at the end of the day, that's what we're doing as evangelists. We're electricians. We're just rocking up, helping to take the wires and the cables that are already there and going, here's what you need. Bam, let's turn the light on. And in order for that person to see the light and come to faith in Christ. So I really think that actually that's what our job is with storytellers as well, with stories that are already out there.
Beautiful. That seems like a great note upon which to bring this to a close. We could talk about this for ages and ages. We'll get you back on, Chip. We'll talk about another movie or something next time out, I am sure. But thanks so much for joining us today. And I hope it's been helpful and interesting for those of you listening. And maybe just some of the things we've been talking about around The Princess Bride. Think about your own favorite movies and kind of pieces of storytelling and art that are in your life. And maybe reflect on some of the same things we've been talking about around The Princess Bride for the movies or TV shows or whatever else it might be that you are interested in. Do not forget, of course, to like, comment, and subscribe. Chip, it is inconceivable to me that people are not subscribing to the channel. But I guess I would have to say, ultimately, do as you wish.
No, you
see, I've been waiting the whole podcast to figure out getting some Princess Bride lines in there, but we got them in. If you've never seen The Princess Bride, you probably just think I'm being weird now. And I guess in some ways I am a little bit, but it's all good. So Chip, thanks so much. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you again on Advanced Passion.